is being led by myself, Director Michael Guzman, and my fellow board member, Director Joyanne Rusha, in collaboration with our RTD staff. Tonight's meeting is focused on RTD's 2025 through 2028 Title VI Program Update, and we're here to listen, learn, and invite your feedback. As I said, I'm Director Michael Guzman. I represent District C in the North and West Denver area, including areas of Lower Downtown. And this is my colleague.
Hello, everyone. We are so glad you're here. I'm Director Rusha, and I represent North and South Park Hill, East Colfax, Central Park, Montbello, Green Valley Ranch, Gateway, Aurora, north of Colfax, as well as parts of unincorporated Adams County and Denver International Airport. During today's meeting, we are providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service could send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like to access a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. This service is available for all of our meetings, tonight and future meetings. Title VI is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin in programs that receive federal funding, like us at RTD. And RTD, our Title VI program, is how we ensure that our services, policies, and decisions are equitable and inclusive for everyone in our service area. Director Guzman?
This update is required every 3 years by Federal Transit Administration, but it's also a chance for us to reflect on how we're doing and how we can do better. The Transit Equity Office, we also call it the TEO, has drafted the 2025-2028 program, and the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee has recommended the item for approval by the full board at next week's meeting. We had a robust public comment process during these meetings. And prior to the board voting on this item next week, Director Rusha, staff, and I would still like to hear more feedback before we vote on this critical matter. That's why we're happy you're with us tonight. We will be covering several key areas of this program, including proposed policy updates for service and fare changes, how we define low income, and how we engage communities through our public participation plan, as well as how we ensure language access through our language access plan. Just a reminder, the purpose of this meeting is to learn about Title VI program update and for you to provide us with your feedback. You do not need to be an expert. We simply are asking you to share your perspective. You can provide feedback tonight through several methods. Here's how that will work. To ask a question, you can simply type your question in the Q&A feature in the Zoom, and your question will be placed in a queue to be answered. Or you can ask your question verbally during the Q&A session. You would need to raise your hand and will be called upon. When your name is called, please repeat your question for the audience. We want to answer as many questions as we can tonight, so we would like it to be concise. Additionally, you can complete our online survey, and there will be a QR code demonstrated later in the presentation, or by sending us an email, and that will be shared at the end of the presentation. We also have agency staff joining us to deliver the presentation and to answer your civil rights questions. We'll turn it over to Carl Green Jr., the Director of the Civil Rights Division, to kick us off. Thank you again for being here and helping us to make transit more equitable.
Thank you so much, Director Rusha and Director Guzman. Again, as introduced, my name is Carl Green Jr., Director of the Civil Rights Division, and it is my great pleasure to present, or introduce rather, the main presenters of tonight's presentation, the Transit Equity Office, which is led by Martin Romero, Transit Equity Manager, Danny McLean, Transit Equity Specialist, and in addition to that, Lorena Gonzalez, Transit Equity Specialist. The Transit Equity Office will now walk through at a high level, giving you all a presentation on some of the key topics included in the 2025 through 2028 Title VI program update. I will now yield the floor to the Transit Equity Office.
Thank you so much, Carl. And hello, everyone. I am Lorena Gonzalez. It's really good to be here with you all this evening. And so everyone knows what to expect for today. We will start with an outline of our presentation. So in the first part, I will give an overview of our civil rights requirements and what we mean when we say Title VI. After, we'll discuss our proposed changes to the Title VI program, including the Public Participation Plan, Language Access Plan, and Title VI policies. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. And then finally, we will outline next steps in the process. Next slide, please. All right, so now we'll cover what is required of RTD as a federally funded transit agency by way of the Title VI Civil Rights Act of 1964. Next slide, please. So as the directors named, Title VI is a federal law brought by the labor and struggle of countless civil rights advocates during the civil rights movement in the 60s. And this legislation says that no one in the United States can be excluded, denied benefits, or discriminated against in any program or activity that receives federal funding because of their race, color, or national origin, which includes those who do not speak English. And on this next slide, please, I'll talk about some of the specific approaches that we take as the Transit Equity Office to comply with this law and meet our overall goals for advancing transit equity. So as mentioned by the directors, again, RTD is federally required to submit a Title VI civil rights program every 3 years that follows a set of guidelines set by the Federal Transit Administration as a condition of receiving ongoing federal funds. And those guidelines, as well as our team's transit equity goals, are at the center of the program that we've developed, which includes the different plans and policies that we're sharing about today. So the tools that we use to operationalize equity and meet federal compliance are, one, community engagement to ensure our efforts, for example, around the public participation plan or language access plan, are community driven. We also conduct equity analyses when there are major service changes or the construction of maintenance facilities, for example, to evaluate potential impacts across different communities. And then finally, we are responsible for monitoring RTD's overall services for equitable delivery. Next slide, please. Now that we've grounded ourselves in the foundation of our work, we can shift to our proposed changes. Next slide, please. So the first program element we'll be discussing is the Public Participation Plan, which was prepared by RTD's Communications and Engagement Department. And so next slide. What is this plan? Well, RTD is federally required to develop a public participation plan to ensure meaningful involvement by Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, as well as linguistically diverse individuals in our decision-making processes. And so an asterisk here, so you all know we'll be using the acronym BIPOC for short throughout this presentation when referring to these populations. And so this updated plan will guide the agency's outreach and engagement strategies through 2028, and it is designed to reflect the lived experiences of these communities by, one, moving beyond one-size-fits-all approaches and meeting people where they are, two, providing language assistance and accessible materials, and three, implementing equity-focused engagement metrics, like ensuring that a percentage of our events intentionally cater to Title VI protected populations. And there is much more to this plan, which can be found on the program website, and we'll be sure to drop a link as we near the end of our presentation. So next slide, please. Yeah, so that covers one of our program elements, and I will now pass it over to my colleague, Danny, to outline her work around language access.
Thanks so much, Lorena. So, as Lorena stated, my name is Dani McLean. I also serve as Transit Equity Specialist in the Transit Equity Office. So, delighted to be here today to talk about the Language Access Plan as well as some Title VI policies later on in our slide deck. So, let's talk about language access. Next slide, please. So, essentially, when we are discussing language access, that means that we want to ensure that RTD's programs are accessible to folks who don't speak English as a first language. We don't want language to be a barrier to folks using our programs or our services. And you may remember, as Lorena stated, Title VI protects race, color, and national origin. And you may be thinking, well, where is language as part of race, color, and national origin? Well, it turns out in 1974, there was a Supreme Court case that established that language is a protected class or category under national origin. So that's where this comes from. So as a result of this Title VI, rights and regulations that we have, per the Federal Transit Administration, RTD must write a language access plan, right, to institutionalize language access in our agency. And what does that mean? So a language access plan essentially dictates how we provide language assistance to the community by way of translating materials, by providing telephonic interpretation if folks need help via our customer care line, perhaps at events so folks can participate in events, or even more innovative solutions like image-based signage that removes the language component entirely. So the two key components in a language access plan, number one is the four-factor analysis. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying the data portion of the language access plan. So that's where we establish, for instance, the languages that are present in our service area, the number of interactions that people, who speak different languages have with our operators and other frontline staff, and even things like the costs of providing language assistance measures. And then perhaps most importantly, the second key component of the language access plan is the language access measures section. So this shows how RTD will provide language access. So if we move to the next slide, I want to highlight activities that RTD is already doing to improve language access here on the left side column. And then on the right, the new activities that our updated language access plan calls for the agency to do in the next 3 years. So things that we already do, I mentioned telephonic interpretation. So folks can call customer care and receive help in over 200 languages, and we also have bilingual English-Spanish specialists on staff to help Spanish-speaking folks. We've been working very diligently to improve the language accessibility of our digital tools, so namely RTD's website and the Next Ride app. We're working on improving our media outreach to multilingual outlets. In the past few years, we established the agency's first ever serving non-English speaking customers training to help frontline staff overcome language barriers. And we're also developing a variety of resources on an ongoing basis to help staff in these interactions with folks. Now, moving forward, we want to continue all of those great, fantastic things. And in addition to that, we've identified some new areas where we can continue to improve. So this can include things like establishing a better translation review process for RTD's website, making sure the translations check out. It's not using funky words to describe certain things in the transit lingo. We want to explore audio announcements in Spanish and pilot them on fixed route buses, ensuring our new ticket vending machines offer language help, even making email and text service alerts available in Spanish and other languages is something we want to do. And then finally, some other examples, although you can refer to the language access plan for all of them. We want to procure some I speak buttons that frontline staff can wear to convey to customers, hey, I speak this language, perhaps I can help you out in your native language. And then finally, we want to look into seeing if there's a way to provide translation devices in RTD fixed route vehicles to help overcome language barriers. So high-level overview of our language access plan. I would encourage anyone to go check it out and absolutely would love your feedback on the initiatives we've outlined in the future to improve language accessibility. Next slide, please. Okay. So carrying on, we're going to proceed into our Title VI policies. So I'm going to lead with the major service change policy first before passing it to Martin for the other policies. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So folks are likely familiar with the fact that RTD implements service changes 3 times a year. So these typically happen in January, the May-June period, and September. And so service changes are aimed at multiple things. So for instance, improving on-time performance, perhaps there's changes in ridership where we need to increase frequency in this area or decrease frequency in this area, and otherwise advancing RTD's system optimization plan. So there's different types of service changes. So this can include simple route adjustments, seasonal adjustments, service increases and reductions, as well as schedule timing. Now, next slide, please. What you may not know as part of the service change process is some behind the scenes work related to our major service change policy. So what is this policy that I speak of? Number one, transit providers must identify, again, per the Federal Transit Administration, what service changes, right? So reductions, increases, and so on, count as a major service change, right? So this is a requirement per the FTA. And why, number two, do we have to do this? We have to do this because we must evaluate impacts of those proposed major service changes on BIPOC communities compared to non-BIPOC communities and low-income communities compared to non-low-income communities. And this is in an effort to ensure that communities are not disproportionately burdened or receiving disproportionate benefit from major service changes. And if an impact is found, RTD has to avoid, minimize, or mitigate those potential disparate impacts. Next slide, please. So up until now, RTD's policy has been defined as what you see in this top line, which is that a major service change is a 25% increase or decrease in service hours on a route or line that lasts a year or more. So in researching about 22 different transit agencies around the nation, we recrafted the scope of this major service change policy so that it would include any 25% change, and that's a plus or minus, in not just service hours, but route miles, service span, and frequency as well. So this also includes changes made at one time. So service development proposes this change in one service change period, or cumulatively adding up minuscule changes to one route or line over a 36-month period. So there's now a cumulative aspect that we're hoping to add. And finally, this also applies to implementation, elimination, or discontinuation of a route or line. So various goals in changing this policy. One is to broaden the criteria for equity analyses. 2 is to add that cumulative component. And 3 is just generally to tighten the language on this policy to make it a bit more specific and clear for those to understand. So I believe that's all I have on major service change policy. So I think at this point, I pass it off to Martin for the remaining Title VI policies.
Thank you, Danny. Hello, everyone. So as introduced, my name is Martin Romero, Transit Equity Manager. Thank you all for joining this evening. So jumping right into the next proposed policy update, an update to our disproportionate burden policy with a change in the definition of low-income households, which will raise the low-income threshold from 150% to 200% of the federal poverty level. Next slide, please. So our current policy defines an individual or a family as low income if it's total combined income. So all of the income of all individuals living in that household is at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. Our proposal is to raise this threshold to 200% to better align with the cost of living in the Denver metropolitan area, right? And this change is important because it aligns with the findings from the 2024 onboard survey, which show that a large share of RTD riders are more likely to fall within this income bracket. The goal of this change is to allow for a more comprehensive and inclusive evaluation of equity impacts on low-income individuals and their families. So on the right here, you see a chart from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that outline the income thresholds used to define low-income households based on household size. So to walk you through a couple examples, under the current policy, a single person household earning up to 23,475 qualifies as low income. And with the proposed increase to 200% of the federal poverty level, that threshold would rise to 31,300. Similarly, a household of four currently qualifies as low income if their combined income is 48,225 or less. Under the proposed change, that threshold would increase to 64,300. That's a difference of a little more than 16,000. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the fair equity policy. The proposed change here is to provide clarification of what constitutes a fair change and when an equity analysis would be required. Next slide. So our current policy ensures that fair changes do not disproportionately burden BIPOC or low-income customers, limiting any negative impacts on these populations to no more than 5% compared to the overall ridership. In addition to fair pricing, the policy requires an equity analysis for any changes to fair payment methods such as passes, electronic payments, ticket vending machines, or online options to assess their impact on customer access. And the proposed update retains the current definition, but it adds clarity around what constitutes a fair change. It expands the scope to include any changes in fair prices, types of fair medium like the cash or electronic payments, fair products such as the day pass or the monthly pass, fare levels like the standard fare versus airport pricing, customer categories like senior and youth, and then access to payment options, including ticket vending machines and any associated fees with that. And the goal here is to clearly define when an equity analysis is required for fare changes and to assess how those changes could potentially impact BIPOC and low-income customers. Next slide, please. Okay, so that concludes our high-level overview of the key proposed updates. We'll now open the floor for questions, any feedback, or any comments. As a reminder, feel free to type your question in the Q&A feature or just go ahead and raise your hand, and then we'll go ahead and unmute you and you can ask verbally. We'll do our best to monitor and respond to all the questions submitted through the Q&A feature. And yeah, let's go ahead and open it up.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in real quick and say thank you to Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. McLean, and Mr. Romero. Thank you for the presentation. And I wanted to recognize that we have several other directors joining this town hall as well. It is our board chair, Julian Bouquet, our second vice chair, Troy Whitmore, the performance committee vice chair, Christopher Guchenritter, and the operations, safety, and security committee vice chair, Ian Harwick. Doing the work of a director is really volunteer a lot of the time and giving up free time from our lives to be able to participate and do the right work. So I just want to make sure that they get proper recognition for being present to this conversation. If you wish to speak and have not done so, and you are on the phone, you can raise your virtual hand by pressing *9. On the Zoom, you should be able to type in your questions or raise your hand using the Zoom functions at the bottom of the screen. And Mr. Romero, I believe that you are helping us to queue up questions. Do you have that function available to you?
Yes, I do. There are no questions in the Q&A portion that I see yet.
Okay.
Do you see a hand raised from Christopher?
Yes, I won't make you pronounce my last name. It's Guchenritter. But thank you. Yeah, so and thank you very much for the presentation. My question goes back to the proposed policy change that Ms. McLean referenced. And let me see if I can phrase it correctly. But essentially what I'm trying to figure out is, let's say there was 1,000, I'll simplify it. There was 100 service changes last year. With the current policy, let's say 20% of those 100 fit into that criteria. With this proposed policy change, how big would that widen the scope? Has that been analyzed? And does that make sense?
So if I am hearing you correctly, again, this is Carl Green Jr., Director of the Civil Rights Division. So if the Board of Directors approves of the proposed policies and the 2025 to 2028 Title VI program update, which is due to the Federal Transit Administration by June 1st, the clock would start June 1st. So it wouldn't be a retroactive analysis of the previous years. It would start June 1st through 2028. But to give you another example of trying to think, if it's hard to explicitly state how many more routes would be analyzed, because it just depends on the nature of the proposed changes throughout each of the three run boards, or the recommendations that are being put forth 3 times a year. But this would be it would be set up where we have already coordinated with our service development staff, Jesse Carter and his team, where we have a repository in place to be able to track these, to Danny's earlier point, these minuscule changes. So this is more so an opportunity for the Transit Equity Office and the agency as a whole to be able to ground truth the level of impact that these minor changes could be having over time by cumulatively tracking them over this 36-month time period, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I completely understand it's not a retroactive, it's a forward-looking, it would be a forward-looking policy. I was just trying to figure out how much that would widen the scope of, how many more service changes would now be included within that new policy. So that was really the reason I was asking the question. And then I guess the second, well, yeah, that was the nature of my question. That's why I was asking and trying to get to.
Yeah,
Sure. And
so, and one other thing that I would highlight too is when we think about Title VI service equity analyses, and knowing that the number of changes 3 times a year as it pertains to the system optimization plan, there's a number of different factors that are feeding into what is being proposed. And for the Title VI service equity analysis, if it does meet the major service change threshold, this is more so so that it's generally there's a step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1 is if a route, whether it's an increase or decrease or whatever the change may be, if it meets the major service change threshold of 25% or more, then we would move into step 2, which is the assessment and comparing the level of impacts towards BIPOC compared to non-BIPOC, low income compared to no low income populations. But the step 0 is the starting point, is where service development will put forth the service change proposal, and then we would evaluate the nature of impact. So more or less, this 36-month addition to the major service change policy allows the agency to have a holistic understanding of the minor changes that could be happening over a period of time, where, say, for example, we are reducing frequency on a particular route in the May 2025, as an example, 2025 service change. And then the next time period, and right, it could be reducing service or reducing route miles, and it didn't meet the major service change threshold. So the level of impact in accordance with our policy, it may not be a major service change. But let's say, for example, in August, or right, the next one that's going to come about is August 31, 2025 service change proposal, where there was another 15%, where it's also reducing the frequency by 15%. So so that will allow us to say, okay, now we're increasing it incrementally over a period of time, but we really need to take an examination to discern, not only for BIPOC populations, but all of our customers and the nature of impact that it has. So although it's under the Title VI federal regulations, it's geared towards ensuring that we are providing service and a level of service to our customers holistically, looking at all of our customers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I see Director Rusha with her hand up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. So I know this is on our website, in the report. And I hope you don't mind if I ask, just for our audience, and just to remind us, if anyone could give, maybe like a high level breakdown of what we know about, the income levels of our current ridership, um, um, relative, either just that or maybe also in comparison to just, the region, as a whole, and anything else you might want to add about, demographics, including, how many of those that we know that might speak English as a second language. I think that kind of context information, is important for us to understand. Any one of those things, that you think might be useful for this conversation. um I
Yeah,
would
well,
love to hear
I
a little
can,
bit more.
we can start with the language access question. Kick it off over to Danny to answer that, while Carl, I'm pretty sure Carl's putting up the data on your other question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can provide some high level on income as well. So we do know that boardings are more likely to be made by low-income customers at the 200% federal poverty level compared to non-low-income customers. This makes sense to us. It's in alignment with national data. So I'll allow Carl to build off of that data point. In terms of language access, so there's approximately 7% of the service area that are considered limited English proficient people. And we refer to folks as linguistically diverse folks. And they speak a large variety of languages. So we have identified, I believe, 19 safe harbors, what it's called, safe harbor languages in the service area. Of course, Spanish is the most common language that we see folks speaking, given our large Latine population locally. But folks speak Dari, they speak Pashto, French, Kinyarwanda. So we have quite incredible linguistic diversity in the service area. So I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to answer further questions than providing just a high-level overview, excuse me.
May I ask, one follow-up on the language proficiency?
Sure.
Thank you. So, you'd mentioned a service area, and I just want to, I just want to understand, I want to make sure that I am, thinking of the definition the same way that you are. So when we say service area, are we talking about like all of RTD as a geographical boundary? Are we talking about a service area in terms of where we are providing service and then, um, like a distance, from a line or a stop? Does that kind of make sense? Like, how do we define service area when we say that? I wanted to make sure that I was in, I had the same definition in my head that you might be using tonight. That was just one question. And um, then I guess I was also wondering if we had, I've seen this in our customer surveys, and I think this might have been on our most onboard survey, but if anyone could also speak to, the percentage or estimated percentage, of Spanish speaking individuals who are current customers, I would love to hear more about that. I have anecdotal data, representing the far northeast and East Colfax and the like, but agency data, would also be great to hear if we have it tonight. Thank you.
Certainly. So in terms of your first question, it is the former that you mentioned. So it is the entire service area. We're not using catchment areas around our routes and lines, similar to how we would do an equity analysis. This is actually using the US Census data across the entire geographic service area. So I hope that answers your first question. For second question regarding Spanish speakers on our services. So one data source that we do have is surveys that that we have distributed to linguistically diverse customers, which is really exciting, as well as interactions, or I should say, to frontline staff that have interactions with linguistically diverse folks. So there's a plethora of data in the four-factor analysis section of the language access plan. But just for some high level, so a huge amount of staff interact with linguistically diverse customers, including Spanish speakers, every single day or almost daily. So that's 2/3 of staff that interact with linguistically diverse folks. And then on the community side, 70% of the folks that we surveyed in the end of last year, so receiving 578 responses, say that they use buses, especially very frequently, and more frequently than rail, I should say. It's within these data sources that we could pull the relative percentage of Spanish speakers, but I would need to take a little bit more time to pull that specific data point for you than I have right now. So I'd be happy to do a follow-up with you and provide that number.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I also recognize I asked a very big question about demographics, and I'm happy to follow up with staff later. But um, I I also see that Director Nicholson has his hand raised, and I think we have someone in our audience with their hands raised. So I will happily yield my time and listen to others.
And Director Rush, I did want to follow up on the one of your questions that you asked with respect to demographics. Danny wonderfully responded to language access and different or various linguistically diverse customers. But as it relates to it, as part of our 2024 onboard survey, the results found that, and this is by boardings, that 56% of our ridership are BIPOC customers compared to non-BIPOC at 44%. So that's looking at ridership data. And then in comparison to the data that we also utilize is population based, which is from the US Census or the American Community Survey 5-year estimates, specifically the 2019 to 2023, which is the latest and greatest census data that we have. And the service district average, looking at 2,345 square miles, a little over 3.08 million folks, 38.2% is considered BIPOC. And as we look at low income, our current definition is at or below 150%. And by boardings, by virtue of this ridership data, it showed that 33% are low income or at or below 150%. And our service district average using the ACS or American Community Survey is 14.1%. But similar to the point that Martin raised with regards to cost of living in the Denver metropolitan area and the proposed definition of increasing it to at or below 200%, we found that boardings for low-income customers at or below 200% is 52% low income compared to 48% non-low income. And using the ACS data, 2019 to 2023, the service district average was 20.3%. So there's a pretty substantial increase between 150 compared to 200%. So that I believe that would round out your responses to your question. So greatly appreciate the question. And to your point, we can call on Director Nicholson for the question.
Director Nicholson, I have been informed that there is a question from the public. You wouldn't mind, we want to take that one before we get to you, and then we'll circle back to you. So Paulo, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Paulo Solorzano with the RTD Riders Alliance. Thanks for having this and all the work, Transit Equity Office, Civil Rights Division. This is great stuff. And well, I am just a few questions. If this isn't like the right place or whatever, no worries. I was just thinking, regarding what the possibilities might be if these were with the current, Title VI public participation, or if we propose the proposed ones. But regarding the meaningful participation and meeting customers, with their lived experience and where they're at. I know, I think everybody knows that it's tough for riders to get to in-person events, if they're even like 6 or 6 p.m. ish, because getting off of work. And I was just wondering, is there any way that RTD, could look into possibly, for public participation, allowing, meaningful participation, meeting people at like stations and stuff, and more of that, and uh, it, or if not, maybe letting, like grassroots community organizations, like GDT or like us, RTD Riders Alliance, to go out there and just actually ask for. I was thinking maybe one thing that you'd like to improve, and have like a live poll where people can see what they're voting on, something. Just that's kind of a long question there, but yeah, I have one more if that's okay. Um,
Yeah,
But
yes.
okay, and the other question was just I did and thank you. I did do some surveys with, I forgot the third party, but for a few months, and I was intercept survey, and I made a public comment, but and the live program is so another incredible thing you guys have done. But yeah, the Spanish speakers I think are getting left out, and I was wondering, again, I don't know if this is just a suggestion or what, but like, is it possible within what we're talking about here for outreach, like maybe forming partnerships, just like the Spanish radio or Univision, the television, to put out things about like the live discount and such, because I think what I saw was it's such a great benefit, like amazing benefit, but more than half of the people I spoke to did not know about it. This just like a few months ago, and God, I mean, they were so relieved to find out that they were saving money. You could just imagine. But that's it. Thank you.
Hey,
Yes.
so I can respond to that, and thank you for the comments and the questions, Paulo. So one part of the language access plan and this update to Title VI program policy does include a plan for public engagement and outreach. And so some of your questions are addressed in that, which is a separate policy from Title VI on its own, and it stands alone for our
Okay.
communications and outreach folks. So yes, reaching out and meeting people where they are at is an important part of doing this work and collecting data properly. And I know that we are leveraging our relationships with places like Servicios de la Raza and other nonprofit organizations where we can meet folks right where they are. And we're working with our highly qualified staff who are experts in communication to be able to be present and be able to communicate in the dominant language in those communities. I am a bilingual English and Spanish speaker, and I have acquired several other languages in my uh, capacities over time in education. So I hear you and I agree with you. For the purposes of this has been a long and ongoing process of collecting information back about this particular policy update that's coming to the board. And the collection of that information has to be documented as part of the policy submission to the board. That way the directors can review it. And that is also, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Carl Green Jr., but I believe that as part of the report that comes to the board and then moves on to the FTA, should it be approved, that documentation is a necessary step in providing the updates to be able to receive certifications and assurances, both from our agency and from the FTA, that we are being compliant with Title VI. And so definitely important stuff. And I thank you for that feedback. I made a note of it because it's a really good question to follow up with our comms team.
Yes, and to piggyback off of that, wonderfully stated, Director Guzman, I will say some additional data points or information that I'd like to share, one of which is our Transit Assistance Grant Program, knowing that there is always room for improvement in the way that we engage our communities, all aspects of our customers and community members. But by virtue of our Transit Assistance Grant Program, where 150 organizations received a grant, overall up to $1 million in transit fares, where we specifically tied in a partnership agreement, so to speak, where those 150 organizations, which includes community-based organizations, nonprofit, direct service providers that serve linguistically diverse folks among other populations to educate folks on our LIVE program. We have been seeing a substantial increase in the number of applications and users in our LIVE program since the Transit Assistance Grant Program. And that's one thing that we heard during our system-wide and fair study equity analysis is there is an opportunity for us to educate, and raise more awareness regarding this program. And I'm just happy to report that we have seen a substantial increase in those numbers, and we're always looking for partnerships with different organizations to raise awareness. And in addition to that, we also have set up various different partnerships by virtue of contract agreements with organizations such as CREA Results, Dr. Mac, or the Denver Regional Mobility Access Coalition, or Denver Street Partnerships of increasing the awareness regarding our LIVE program. But we're always open to work in partnership with community to educate folks on our LIVE program. All right, so now we'll move to Director Nicholson.
Awesome. Thank you. I just have two quick questions. The first one, I was doing some homework, and I was wondering most major transit agencies when they do a change, a renumbering or a renaming of routes, undergo an equity analysis as part of those changes, and I wanted to check to find out if that's something that we do as well.
And just to clarify, you said the bus numbers, the numbers to the bus?
Yeah, if we were to go through and, for example, change the light rail lines to, different letters, or change them to colors, or were to renumber the buses to match what New York does with like N32 and M14 and that kind of thing. Does RTD conduct equity analyses on any kind, if there's any kind of, renaming, relabeling, if we were to rename the Metro ride, for example, to be, something else, would that trigger an equity analysis or not?
That's a great question. So as we think about our major service change policy, there's not necessarily a change in whether it's frequency, route miles. So the direct answer to that question is that it wouldn't a trigger analysis, but to put a finer point to that, or a pivot to that, let's say, for example, there is a particular route and it is split into two, right? For example, if it was the X, it started off as the X, now it's the XA and the XB. That would, with this new proposed policy, that would meet or qualify as a major service change policy. But what I would say, although it doesn't necessarily meet the major service change policy, which would necessitate an equity analysis, as part of working in concert with Stuart Summers and his team in the communications and engagement department, there would be a level of education and awareness, i.e. a campaign, to communicate with our customers and community members so they are well aware of the changes, especially as it relates to schedules and so on and so forth. We want to make sure that we're bringing folks along to ensure that our customers are being taken care of.
Awesome. Just one sort of follow-up question to that. When it comes to limited English proficiency or language access, maybe our lovely colleague who works on those issues could speak to perhaps the impact of those sorts of changes on populations with limited English.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly expect that changes in names would disproportionately impact folks who speak different languages. So I'm assuming that that's why a lot of different agencies have that as part of their major service change analyses. But I can't speak to it much beyond saying that, right, recognizing that it probably would offer more of a difficulty for those populations than others.
So is that, sorry, can I ask a follow-up, or is that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate it. So the way we work currently, would that change even be brought to you the way it is right now? Because apparently it's not a major service change. Do you guys have any input into that kind of thing at the moment, or is it something that we've just sort of decided we're not gonna take a look at? You know what I mean? That's basically what I'm asking. Is it sounds like it doesn't trigger disparate impact. It might trigger disproportionate burden. I'm just wondering whether you guys would even get brought in on that conversation, given what you just said.
And Director Nicholson, I apologize, my dog was barking. Can you restate the initial question? Because I want to best support answering the question.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like there is a language access implication from making those kinds of changes, but it sounds like from what you said that language access implication would not necessarily trigger an equity analysis. And I just sort of wanted to understand, if we did have a change like that came along, to what degree does your department, do you or the other staff that work on English access, even get involved in that kind of change if we're not saying that it's that it's actually, it doesn't rise to the level the way other agencies see it as rising to the level.
And what I will say, and Danny may have spoken to this, is, and I want to give her some applause, and even just the Transit Equity Office in general, as we think about language access and where we were 3 years ago, or even before that, by virtue of the 2022 to 2025 Title VI program and the language access plan and implementation schedule, we have worked very hard of ensuring that we're integrated into those various different communication initiatives and campaigns. So to answer your question directly, we are baked into or integrated into the process for various communication initiatives to ensure that we are bridging the gap for linguistically diverse customers. And Danny could expand more if she would like to.
No, I was really just going to plus one what you were saying, because yes, recognizing that formally a name change is not built into, for example, our major service change policy, but knowing that informally our office is very much involved in a lot of agency initiatives. So for instance, if a bus stop is being proposed to move, like we've been brought into conversations to inform that from an equity lens and communications, assets and campaigns like Carl mentioned. So yeah, I would say that perhaps while it's not specified in that major service change policy, these are certainly discussions that we're involved in every single day. And in that way, we bring that equity lens to the agency's work, or perhaps it's not as institutionalized. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I mostly appreciate it. The last little thing I have is basically, there was yesterday the agency announced the change to the name of the free mall ride, and I was just wondering if you can speak to the degree to which you guys were brought in on that change and any kind of analysis you did on the change to the name.
Sorry, that's a bit off topic. I just want to recognize time. It's 6:24, and we haven't heard from a couple of our public guests. Director Nicholson, is it okay if I just pause for a moment here so we can engage them?
I would just a quick yes or no answer would be great, and then I'd be happy to move on. I'm done after that.
If I may. Potentially a conversation maybe later down the road. I know that this might not fall into the realm of our current staff members that are there, and I want to make sure that they're not going to be speaking, on things that might not apply or might not. So potentially a question, but to later on, I would recommend Director Nicholson. Thank you.
Obviously, you're the chair. I would just say this is a discussion of Title VI. It's a discussion of equity. It's a discussion of language access. And this is something that happened yesterday. So I think a reasonable question is, did we do exactly what we're talking about when that change happened?
Okay. Thank you for the question. We will follow up with you when we have an opportunity to circle back with Chief Communications Officer and Engagement and Outreach, Stuart Summers, and provide a more fleshed out answer. This meeting is a town hall for the public, and I appreciate everybody's participation because we as directors are the public. We are elected to represent our communities. It is 6:25, so we do need to move on before the webinar ends. It looks like there might be a question in the Q&A. We'll have this as our last question. Would the major service change policy be able to monitor things like, say, overcrowding? For example, the 16L being discontinued and then the 16 experiencing overcrowding.
Wonderful question. That is something that we monitor via our service performance monitoring report. We look at crowding or overcrowding, vehicle loads. We look at on-time performance, service availability, vehicle assignments. So those are measures that items that we do measure as part of our service performance monitoring. So outside of the major service change or service change equity analysis or fare equity analysis, we do monitor overcrowding and load factors on our bus routes and rail lines. So looking at the time check, I will bring back up the slide to move us on to the next portion.
Thank you so much, Carl. Listen, everybody, I appreciate your participation. We have gotten some great comments and questions answered. There may be more that you think of after this presentation. So before we conclude, let me kind of give you an explanation of where we started and where we're at. To ensure that RTD promotes fair, accessible, and equitable public transportation, for all, regardless of race, color, national origin, or language ability, the Transit Equity Office began the process of updating the program per the FTA in July of 2024. Staff drafted changes to the program up until December of 2024. Now the proposed Title VI policies were available to the public for comment from December 24 to January of 25. Staff worked to incorporate feedback and draft the Title VI program update. Once again, staff asked for public comments on the entire Title VI program from April 7th to May 22nd of 2025. During the April 9th Operations Safety and Security Committee, staff presented the 2025 Title VI program update. And staff once again presented the final recommendation action to the Operations Safety and Security Committee on May 14th. The video and transcript of that presentation are available to the public on the RTD website. The committee passed the item to the full board on May 28th for final approval. Next Wednesday, the full board will vote to hopefully approve and adopt the final 2025 through 2028 Title VI program update. On May 30th of 2025, the approved program update would then be submitted to the FTA for approval and posted to the RTD website. I believe, yes, there we are. All right. And I don't want to make a mistake and not include my partner on the board for this town hall. So give me 1 second just to double check where we are at. All right, Director Rusha, this is you.
Thank you, Director Guzman. And if we can be patient, I'm just going to flip screens here. So I just want to close out by again thanking everyone who joined us this evening and participated. We also, staff may interrupt me if I am wrong, but I believe this meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. So please feel free to go and look back at the meeting, share it with your friends and colleagues, as well as look at our Title VI page online and read more in depth about the program if you'd like. If you had questions, as Director Guzman noted, and they're still percolating or we didn't get a chance to answer them, please know that we are here to continue this conversation. through our board meeting and even beyond. So you can reach out to the Title VI office, and you can provide feedback at rtd-denver.com / T62025. Again, that's rtd-denver.com / T62025. Or you can scan the QR code that was in the presentation. And if you want to email comments directly to the board, you can reach all of us at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. As noted, we will be voting on this item at our May 28th board meeting, which is next Wednesday. You can attend in person or participate remotely via Zoom or call in. Meeting information is on the RTD website, and we start our meetings at 5:30. Again, we'll be voting on this Title VI program update as a board during our May 28th meeting next Wednesday. And if you would like to email your individual director, you can visit our website and find out who they are. Or if you'd like to send a comment to the entire board and be included in public participation and comment, again, that's rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. I've repeated that a couple of times because that's our new whole board email address for those who'd like to address us all at once. I know that I take the time to read every email and every public comment, as do many of my colleagues, including my co-pilot tonight, Director Guzman, and we try to respond as quickly as practicable. But your feedback on this and all other matters is appreciated, welcome, and we encourage you to continue to engage with us. That is how we make our most informed votes. And with that, I would like to just echo Director Guzman's sentiments to our staff for being with us tonight, helping us put this together, putting on an amazing presentation, but also all of the work that went into this program update. It took a few years, and I know the work never stops. And so if we don't say it enough in public forum, I'll say it today. Thank you. We see you, and we appreciate you so very, very much. I will let Director Guzman go ahead and close. But again, I thank everyone for being here, for your patience, for your grace, for your participation, and for helping us be the best transit agency that we can for you. Thank you.
Chair Bouquet, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to first thank staff very much for being here and being present. Again, we couldn't run the show without all of your guys' help. So again, the many, many hours that we don't see, we greatly appreciate. I know the public greatly appreciates. So I do want to just say thank you as, the board chair for all of you being here and present. Greatly appreciate it. And then finally wanted to say my kudos to Director Rush and Director Guzman because as directors, we are the communication channels between the people who are truly our bosses, which is the public, and the agency. And hosting events like this, we don't have to do this. And for the two of you to go and take the time, put the effort into this, and to host a session like this just shows the commitment that this board has. So I did want to just show my appreciation for the two of you for hosting this. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. One last thank you. I appreciate everybody's hard work on this. If we receive more questions, we will certainly share them with your office and look for some answers and support. I do believe that this recording will be a great tool to use going into community and having an immediately available translated transcript will help me greatly in interfacing with the Spanish-speaking community and providing knowledge, and knowledge is power and knowledge is access. So by making these changes, I would say thank you because it lowers barriers to access. And that's what equity can look like and justice for every member of the community that we serve. And I know that it is painstaking and really detailed work that you do. So I just want to say thank you one more time. Board office staff, Ms. Knapp Rhodes, Ms. Parrish, Ms. Snell, thank you so much for helping us get this together. I know that it was done on an accelerated pace with a strong sense of urgency, and we are grateful to you for your support and your help in setting everything up tonight. And none of this could happen without staff support under our General Manager and CEO, Deborah Johnson. I don't believe she has joined us tonight, but this is the staff that it demonstrates the excellence that she brings to the agency and to the community at large. And I just have to give the shout out for wonderful teamwork and collaboration on this between board and staff. Thank you very much. And we will end this meeting. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.